Hello all. No, you haven't stumbled onto a recording of SREC. This is the webinar. I'm your host today. So welcome to our webinar. It's entitled How to Improve a Safety Culture, the part an IOSH professional can play. My name is Neil Catton and I'm a member of the consultancy group and also a current serving vice president. Our session today will last about 1 hour, including questions, and in the usual way, you can put those in the Q&A function. Our two speakers today are two consultants that I have come to know and respect a great deal through our association through the East Anglia branch. I will just introduce them briefly in a moment, but they will go on to introduce themselves in more detail. We do have the fabulous, let me repeat that, the fabulous Angela Abbs, branch chair of IOSH East Anglia branch and owner of AMA Health and Safety, and just nominated as an IOSH Vice President. So congrats, Angela. We also have the wonderful Natasha Wales-Dixon, Vice Chair of IOSH East Anglia Branch and owner of She Advisors Limited. So I did ask Natasha if I could copy her fantastic hair colour, but she did say it wouldn't work for me. I don't know why, but without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Angela to start the session. Angela, over to you.
Thank you, Neil. That's quite an introduction to live up to, but I'll do my best. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen, if I may. And hopefully we'll be... There we go. That looks reasonable to me. I take it it's okay with you guys, is it? Yeah. Okay. So health and safety culture, positive health and safety culture, how can we contribute to that? Well, let's have a look at this. First of all, I'll introduce myself just so you get a little bit of an idea of where I come from. I'm sort of construction-based background, really, local authority and social housing, developing properties, that sort of thing, and surveying. I've now been a consultant and trainer for almost 10 years and IOSH experience 25 plus years. It worries me to think I'm old enough to have done that. IOSH has been a truly strong thread throughout my whole career. I'm chartered member at the moment and I'm being nagged to do my fellowship next. Currently East Anglian branch chair, and as Neil said, I'm so fortunate to have been elected now for vice president for next year. Really looking forward to that and working with the team. I'm on the construction group committee. I'm an IOSH mentor. I sit on the peer review panels for those taking their charterships. And I'm a communicator and a relationship builder, and that truly is a key skill of developing this positive health and safety culture. And the picture of my little dog up there is just something that when you see Natasha's presentation, I just had to put a pet up there. I'll leave that one hanging for a little while, but you'll see why later. So 20 minutes I've got, and then Natasha's going to follow with 20 minutes, and then we're going to do some Q&As afterwards. So what I'm going to try and cover for you is first of all identifying that poor safety culture, and then how to support and influence your client from the boardroom and also speaking to the guys on the factory floor, because you need to talk to the whole sort of company and the whole set of people around that. Being competent and confident in yourself and building relationships. As I say, building relationships are a real thing that health and safety professionals need to do. So if you're new to the industry, starting off in your career, or perhaps older in the industry, let's say older in years served in the industry, I should say, you need to brush up on those skills. So stay tuned and we'll see what we can do for you. Now, the basic skills that a consultant needs are really twofold in my view. Technical skills should be a given. You know, you're a consultant, you're qualified, you know what you're doing, but you've got to remain competent. So those technical skills are a given and you can bring them to the party quite happily. But the soft skills, the communication skills, are the ones that we probably need to work on. Not everybody can talk to everybody. I mean, us girls, we chatter along forever, but sometimes, you know, it's not easy to talk to those people at different levels, from that factory floor right up to boardroom level. And then, as well as that, you've got to be a professional, all the time a professional, remembering those 4 pillars of IOSH that we've got. You know, integrity, absolutely, respecting other people, being competent, and the service you give. Your health and safety, technical and legal knowledge has really got to be good and sharp. Having said that, the relationship building is kind of there. You've got to do that. You can't bluff your way through that. But your technical knowledge, to a certain extent, you can sort of say, well, I don't actually know that one, or I'm not sure about that one. I can go back and I can check and I come back to you. So you've always got that little default there. And then you've got to know about everybody's role and everybody's job. I mean, before you go and see a client, you'll be looking into what sort of business they have, what sort of people they've got working for them, and what their roles and what their jobs are. And we'll talk about that in just a little while. And just generally being a superhero. I mean, you've got to, especially when you do accident investigations, or heroin in our cases. So this is it, isn't it? Picture this. You're sort of working away, doing your stuff like you normally do. Then you get the phone call. Somebody's had an accident and you've got a new client there that's called you and they need you in there now. So you drop everything and go. And I'm just going to refer to a Bandsaw incident, which is a bit of a nasty that I dealt with not so long ago. I had, it's quite, I mean, I deal with a lot of SMEs, and it was just down the road from me actually. And there's quite a small company. They've got about a dozen people working for them. And what their role, or what their manufacturing was, if you like, they've got a little factory unit, and they were producing pet food, but they were producing it in frozen blocks. So they were getting sort of the raw meat in, and then they were freezing it down, and they were cutting this into blocks for packaging. And there's a bandsaw to cut through this frozen product. Unfortunately, the guy who had the incident, he didn't have the safety bar in place. He didn't have his right gloves on. He wasn't using a push stick. So he was pushing this frozen block through with his hands on the bandsaw. Something slipped and he put his hand into the saw, and it cut across, if you can see my hand, it cut across sort of the palm. But what he did was, it's sort of a nervous natural reaction apparently, so the HSE inspector said, is that once you pull your hand free, you almost relax and it goes back in again. So he had kind of a double cut there. I shan't show the pictures. I did have pictures, but it wasn't particularly pleasant. So horrible. So the bosses are worried, quite honestly. You know, they are really worried. They're worried for the employee, obviously, because they care for him. He'd gone off. I didn't actually see him, but I did see the pictures. Very worried about him, very worried about his family. He was a Hungarian guy, so English wasn't his main language. They're obviously worried for themselves. What if the HSE calls? What if they're prosecuted? What if there's a civil claim? There's all of those worries going through. And then they start to think, oh dear, where's that risk assessment? We've got a policy somewhere. Is it good enough? So they really need you. So you need to be all things to them at that particular time. They don't have a great safety culture. I walked in there and I sort of felt it. So how do you know? So the signs of a poor culture, everything gets a bit reactive, doesn't it? When things go wrong, there's all these knee-jerk reactions. And a poor health and safety culture really reflects that, because they haven't got stuff in place. They're not working cleanly and clearly. I went in there and there was an unhappiness in the team, not only because of the accident, but it was a case of he did that, he didn't do the other. So the blame culture was there. The leadership were panicking. There had been poor leadership quite clearly. The messages that had been given to some of the workers there hadn't been clear. There weren't proper procedures in place. The leadership really weren't working by example. This sounds awful, you know, but they're really nice people, but they just hadn't got it together on the health and safety front. Workers weren't consulted. They felt undervalued. And as I dug deeper into it, they had to really ask for proper PPE, so, you know, undervalued in that way. And they weren't consulted on procedures and things, so they didn't engage with it properly. Sickness rates, you know, there was a lot of sort of duvet days, lots of days where people weren't turning up, and there was a pretty high staff turnover. And you could sort of see that things were not quite right in terms of cost cutting. You know, not everything was nice and shiny and new. It was all quite used equipment, and the PPE that they did have wasn't particularly bright and cheerful, shall we say. When I delved deeper, you could tell that there were high, not accident rates, but incidents, little incidents. And unfortunately, this incident became a real nasty. But incident rates, you know, little things were happening, things were being dropped, things were being knocked over, people were getting little cuts and scrapes. So little things were happening which should have given them an indication that things needed to change. Workplace wasn't particularly tidy, which made me think that actually because the workers weren't particularly engaged, they weren't really looking after the workplace, and the bosses weren't coming behind and supervising and saying, look, we need to tidy up here, we need to work more efficiently and cleanly. Mistakes, violations, you know, the classic stuff that you learn in your studies when you're looking at poor culture. No health and safety committee. Well, to be perfectly honest, in a little company like that, you probably wouldn't expect a committee as such, but you would expect perhaps there to be input from the workers into how health and safety is dealt with. In a bigger company, you'd expect a health and safety committee. In fact, with a company I was dealing with yesterday, I was really pleased because I've been working with them for about 3 months. They've got about 250 workers, and they've just put their first health and safety committee meeting in. And that's really engaged people from the floor level right up to the boardroom, because there's representatives at all levels in that committee. And now things are being talked about, and now things are starting to get done. Going back to where we were, poor productivity. They were struggling on the productivity front, and then productivity, because they were struggling, was taking precedence over safety. Not good. The management and the workers, when there's a poor culture, they're either going to hide from you or they're desperate to talk to you. When you go in, sometimes you get the feeling that they're going, oh, thank goodness somebody's come in and perhaps we can sort a few things out. Or they hide from you because they think it's a blame culture. They think it's their fault somehow. Otherwise, health and safety can be ridiculed. You know, it's a bit of a laugh. Oh, health and safety. I'm sure you've all had some of that. So where we want to be then, we want to be more proactive. We want this company that you're going in to see to be forward-looking and to be looking for things before they happen and putting the right measures in place. So we need a good team feel. We need to feel that that team is engaged, it's together, and there's no blame. So the opposite of what we've just seen, really. Positive, visible leadership, setting an example. Workers listened to, and actually not listened to, being heard as well. Workers feeling valued. Then your sickness rates will start to lower. You'll retain your staff, and there'll be investment in health and safety. Low accident incident rates, so it's all going to turn on its head and it's all going to start looking a lot nicer picture. The workplace is going to be tidy because the workers care, and then you'll get fewer mistakes because they've got pride in their job and they're working safely. You'll have a strong commitment or a strong health and safety committee if it's a bigger company, but a strong feed-in from your workers, and you need to get to there for them. Then your productivity will work alongside health and safety. And your management and people will be happy to talk to you and work alongside you. And health and safety becomes part of their normal working day, part of their daily procedure. So the whole picture looks a lot better, and you get a happier looking worker and a happy feel to it, and a safer workplace. So you, as a health and safety profession, how can you make that difference? How can you win over? How can you have those conversations? To start with, they know their job and you know yours. You know the health and safety bit. You know your technical skills on the health and safety front, but they know their job. You can't walk into a company and know what their procedures are. You can't know how to work their machines. You can tell them how to do it safely, but they know their job. So you have to engage them. You have to listen to them in terms of their job, and then you can input your technical skills. So you need to work together to enable you to be able to dig deep and have conversations with them, and to plan and improve for the future. And how do you do that? By building trust and building relationships. As I say, in a way, your technical skills almost take a back seat, and your people skills, your power skills, your communication skills really come to the fore here, and you've got to talk to people at all of those different levels. And that enables you to have frank exchanges, because if there's a trust between you and your client and the workers that you're dealing with, you'll be able to say, well, actually, this isn't going quite right, and we need to be looking at it a different way. So enable those frank exchanges by building trust. then you'll start to be able to change those attitudes and behaviours, which will make that safer workplace and develop that better culture. So you've got some power here. They've called you in. You haven't just waded in there and said, I'm going to do this. They've actually called you in. They've recognised that you know your health and safety stuff. They've recognised that you're a professional. So you're on the front foot already. So you can be a positive influencer. You can affect those outcomes and make those positive changes. If you show them that you're confident, then you will really find that they will listen to you and you'll have the power to make a difference. Now, Natasha and I recently have been talking about imposter syndrome, and that can work in your life in general. I mean, now coming into the vice president role, I mean, I've got real imposter syndrome there. I'm just a normal health and safety consultant. Natasha, before we started this, we were saying, oh, we've got to talk to all these people, and you do get a little bit of, oh, you know, who am I to say what I'm saying? But, you know, when you go into a workplace, they will recognise you. They've called you in. They'll recognise you as a professional, knowing your stuff. So believe in yourself, and then you can speak with confidence and have that power. So positive influence then, with that power, builds trust. If you present yourself well, you can be a real calming, a real motivational influence to them, and you can start to chip away at those old perceptions and those old things that you've seen in the poor health and safety culture to develop that new one. So it is all about people skills, soft skills, power skills, as we call them. But one size doesn't fit all there. You know, health and safety is the same. You can go into a power station, you can go into a little enterprise like I go into or went into when I had this Bandsaw incident. I can go in where there's 250 workers. You know, Legionella is still the same, asbestos is still the same, machinery and guarding is still the same. Whatever health and safety place you find yourself in, whatever industry you find yourself in, health and safety is the same. What's different is your clients. You can have a small enterprise, a medium one, a really large one. You've still got a boss sitting at the top. You've still got workers working on the ground. So you've got to find out what their differences are and what makes them tick. So we're not all great communicators, but what I'm asking you is to brush up on those communication skills and talk to those different levels, and then you'll really be able to find out, you'll really be able to get down to the nuts and bolts, and you'll really be able to get their trust and find out what's going on. So you can observe it, but when you observe it, you see it. When you listen, you hear it. When you understand it, you can be understood as well. All about communication. So you go and say, yes, I've seen that, I've listened to them and I understand what they're on about. But actually, really observe and see, really listen and hear, really make yourself understand what they're about and make yourself understood. Clear communication, key. Building those relationships, getting to know them at the level that they need, at the level that you need to speak to them at. So stand in their shoes, and we'll look at that in just a second. First of all, you need to take a little bit of a look at yourself. Everybody's got a sort of a look in the mirror thing. You see yourself as you see you, but try and see you as other people see you. So you may be not exactly what you think you are. That sounds a really funny thing to say, but if you get an idea of how you speak and how you act and what your passions are and your strengths, you can work with those. But you need to be doing something about your weaknesses. And how do you find out about your weaknesses? I would ask a friend, quite simply, say, look, be straight with me here. When I talk to you, how do I come over? Am I trustworthy? I mean, quite some hard-hitting things maybe. And a true friend will tell you. And failing that, there's the DISC profile, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all sorts of these personality things and traits that you can find out, and you can find out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And I would suggest, as a consultant, if you haven't done it already, have a go at those, and you'll perhaps find out where you need to brush up. IOSH Blueprint as well. IOSH Blueprint can show you where you need to brush up, so have a look at that. And then there's coaching and mentoring. You know, once you identify what's going on or what's going on within you or what you need to brush up on, find a coach, find a mentor. Again, IOSH mentoring, great. So when you get to your first client meeting, you've got to be open and friendly. I would suggest you let them talk about themselves. You know, people love talking about themselves. They're on sort of solid ground, really, because they know what they're talking about. So if you ask them, how are you and how are your family, or, you know, just get something outside the workplace that you can connect with them with. Let them talk about themselves and then get on to the questioning and the finding out what's going on. This was an accident investigation, but, you know, you may not be called in on an accident investigation. I would just say, though, when you tell them about you, don't embellish. We're all a little bit, oh, I can do that, I can do the other. But don't lie or embellish, because a bit further along the line, they'll find out. So just be open and honest with them. Be who you are. I think I said earlier on to somebody today, you know, to thine own self be true. It's a bit of a saying, but it's actually it. You know, you are who you are. You're there because you're talented. You're there because you've got great technical knowledge, and you're there because they've called you in. So, you know, you're there and you're on that front foot. When you begin to build that trust with them, you can tell them like it is. You really need to be honest with people, particularly in an accident situation, because they're going to be facing maybe the HAC, they're going to be facing perhaps a prosecution. So you can't make any promises to them. You can't say, oh, actually, this is all going to be okay. You really need to tell them like it is. Reassure them, be a critical friend, build that trust for future work with them, and get them on side. Some of you, and quite a lot of you, I'm sure, will have known Maslow, good old Maslow, but your client is this. This is how you get this culture in. You've got to get to know the people. You've got to get to know the client. So understanding that person will build the relationship. So the basic level, if you look at the left-hand side there, you've got anxiety and tension at the bottom, and you get up there to sort of a bit of confidence and growth. So once you understand those basic needs, they need to have those basic needs in you in a way. They need to be able to trust you. They need to be able to feel secure with you. I'm not saying loving and belonging. That sounds a bit sort of fluffy, doesn't it? But there is a bit of friendship there. And then you will get to the self-actualization and self-esteem, really finding out what makes them tick. So have a little think about Maslow when you get to know your client. And the same works for the business in a way, because their business is a person growing in a way. They need that basic operational level. They need the safety. They need the culture. They need the esteem. They need that creativity as time goes on. So if you can get in there and work on those levels and see where they are on those levels, that will help you identify where their safety culture is and where you need to improve it and where you need to prompt the changes. So understand and research their business. You need to do that before you see them, because otherwise, you know, you're going to look like a bit of an idiot if you don't know what their business is about. So you need to do a bit of research on them, and then you can support and engage the stakeholders in there. So the OSH professionals' place in that business can be at all those different levels, but principally in the safety and the culture level. So have a think on that. And these slides will be available for you later on. And then it's a bit of a sales pitch in a way. It's ask them what they want and give them what they need. Ask them, what do you want from me? How do you need me to support you? And then you can tell them what they need from you and how you're going to support them. So really listen to the answers they give you and get them to understand what they need once you've worked out what they want are. Again, stand in their shoes. One step at a time, ongoing relationship. They will need to have the confidence in you to make those frank exchanges more comfortable. So it's really about, they will want something from you when you go in. They'll have called you in for a reason, be it an accident, be it support, whatever. So you need to find out, listen to them, hear the answers, and then tell them what they need. You can turn it around to that professional talk. So that's the client themselves. And then you've got to communicate with the workers. So there is a difference. Although they're basically still people. So who are you talking to? What's their perspective? Their perspective might be, I've got a decent pair of safety boots. The client's perspective might be, I've got to spend X amount of thousand on this, whatever it might be. So they've got different perspectives. Are they feeling safe in their work? Going back to those poor and good health and safety culture screens that we had earlier on. Think about your message to them. Are you telling, advising, persuading, instructing, fact-finding? So again, your communication skills come in there. Again, understand them and be understood by them. The language used in your words we'll look at in just a minute, and I'll leave you on a parting shot with that one. But be sensitive to them. And once again, they know their job, but you know yours. Okay. Again, give them what they need. What do they need to have confidence in you? So the level of confidence in you is going to be very different at factory floor level than it is at boardroom level. A factory floor level, you'll need to change your language. You'll need to speak in general terms to them. You'll need to ask them how they're feeling about their work. Have they got what they need to be safe? All of those things. And it's a very different conversation to the boardroom level. When you ask them what they want, bear in mind that your client's needs will come into it. So again, don't make promises you can't keep to them, although you need to get them on side. Listen, interpret, understand. Don't make promises you can't keep. And again, support and influence. And this is a final tip for you, is to watch your language. It's a take it on yourself thing. So if you use, when you're communicating, I feel, rather than you need to, it's a really different way of speaking, but it stops pointing the finger at them and it sort of takes it on you. So if you would say something like, I'd love it if you could help me here, rather than you have to, because as soon as you say the word you have to, you almost point the finger. If you don't point the finger physically, you're certainly doing it in words. I feel that this could work better if we, sounds better than you're not doing it right, doesn't it? I'm not explaining this well. Sounds better than you're not getting it. Would you like me to go over that again? Sounds better than you're not listening. I'm not sure about that. Let's talk about it. Sounds better than you're wrong. So just have a little bit of think about the language you use and the way you communicate, and take it on yourself. So if you start with I or me rather than you, as soon as you say you, you're almost pointing that finger. So try not to do that. So my final thought then, we refer to them as power skills because without them, people's technical skills aren't running on all cylinders. So that positive health and safety culture starts with you and building a strong relationship with your client and their workers. So just have a think what skills you need to brush up on, the people skills or the technical skills, and it's not always about those technical skills. So thank you for listening to me. We'll deal with questions a bit later. And now over to Natasha, and I think she's going to tell you a little bit how she's worked with some of her individual clients with some of those things in mind, and watch out for the pets. I'll stop sharing. Over to you, Natasha.
Thank you, Angela. Let me just find my screen so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Can we all see that okay? And hear me? Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon, everyone. As Neil and Angela so nicely said, I'm Natasha, Wales-Dixon, and I own She Advises. And I'm here to talk to you a bit about how you can apply some of that theory that Angela's just been going through with us with a client. If my screen will move. Before I do that, I should probably tell you who I am, give you some respect for me, I suppose, in my consultant's role. I am a chartered health and safety professional, and I'm lead consultant and trainer at She Advises Limited, and owner, as we've already established. I've also done degree studies in social sciences and business to back up how I understand how people interact with each other and how that works. I'm currently vice chair of IOSH East Anglia branch, a long-standing member of a local safety group for businesses, and a festival assessor in my spare time. There's a whole load of other things I get involved in, but you'd be bored if I told you all of them, so I won't. Although I will tell you, I am also a mum, a wife, a nan to 2 lovely grandchildren, a bank for all of my grown-up children, and those are some of my pets. I have 12 cats, 2 dogs, terrapins, you name it, we've got it. It's a zoo, so it keeps me pretty busy, and means that I have to apply my knowledge of how to promote positive safety culture in lots of ways, not just when I'm at work. Encouraging children as they grow to respect safety is a skill that's been quite useful to me. Along with that, I've got 10+ years experience as a consultant in the field across industry, most recently for my own company, and employ a team of consultants. We have a team-based approach to consultancy where we work together. We don't necessarily have one consultant assigned to one business. We focus on our own individual areas of competence at the time that is needed for the client and their needs. We focus on sharing knowledge with our clients, which is really important as a consultant for you guys to understand. It's about us sharing what we know, those technical skills, those behaviours, that learned behaviour that Angela's talking about. We need to share that with our clients. We should be imparting that knowledge and that skill to those businesses so that when we're not there, they are safer. Otherwise, they're only safe when you're on site. I also have an extensive network of OSH professionals, both in-house with me and consultants externally that I've worked with over the years, 2 of whom you've met this afternoon. So what is safety culture? Just as a recap, a definition of safety culture. The safety culture of an organisation is the product of individual groups and values, attitude, perceptions, competencies and patterns of behaviour. That's a huge description, a huge definition of safety culture. And how on earth do we manage to address those things? Because those things are ingrained in people. To try and explain to you how we do it, I've pulled a case study for a client that I've worked with. I worked with these guys for quite a few years, and I'll tell you what the end result was in a short while. When we started working with this animal bedding supplier, they're a manufacturer, and some of the things that they said to us are on there. They thought they had a mammoth task. They weren't sure where to focus first. They had ignition risks. Imagine an animal bedding supplier where they're shredding things up, creating wood shavings in a very big dusty shed, in essence. They had occupational health risks from the inhalation of dusts. There were incidents occurring from unsafe behaviours, and they were just doing what they'd always done. There was no understanding of why, but the process was working. The product was still going out of the door, but there were these issues, these risks to health and these incidents that were occurring. And they needed to know where to go and what to do. And that's where this comes in. So this model in front of you is our model of competence that we use in-house within our business. We use this to compare ourselves to as consultants and how we can apply that and how we can make it work. So if we think about our knowledge and how we can use our knowledge to promote safety culture, a positive safety culture, helping people to understand the purpose of regulations. Yes, the content of them, but really the history of regulation. A lot of us in consultancy world will not have the experience of pre-1974, pre the Safety at Work Act, pre-2000 even, before a lot of our regulations were honed and detailed. Helping people to understand why that's relevant. You know, I want you guys to ask yourselves, do you understand where those regulations come from? What they're embedded in, what the purpose of them is? Because if you can help your clients understand that, they will respect them far more, rather than just saying, this is what the manual handling regulations say. Explain to them why they were there in the first place. Thinking about our skills and our report writing, or our networking, our talking to people, effective communication. If you think about report writing, you know, how do you write reports for people? How do you compile those documents that you do? Do you write them in a positive light? Is it about promoting safety, about making people feel well looked after, about saying we prioritise safety, we prioritise risk reduction? And if you can word them in a positive way, it will have an effect on the culture of the business from the documentation perspective, which I think a lot of the time we forget about. Using your experience, explaining to your clients where you've seen things go wrong before and where you've seen things go right, more importantly. Using information like I am with the case study I've sort of given you a bit of an idea about how that works, how it can work for one business and how it improves their productivity, as Angela mentioned earlier on. Helping them to understand why it's good for them at all levels. Angela mentioned about talking to people when they're doing the job. If someone is doing a job and you're talking them through that process and trying to help them understand a safer way of doing it, they might not understand that. If they're doing everything they've always done in the way they've always done it, like the company I was talking about did, they won't see the improvement, the benefit of change. So explaining to them where that's happened to you and your experience can help. Your training and your CPD, I'll pick continuous professional development out of that section. You think about your continual professional development that you're undergoing, sharing that information with people, helping them understand when new technology is becoming available, helping them understand how they might be able to apply it. And this is all about helping them to understand. It's not about telling them about new technology and saying you must use this. This is available, it must be done. It's these are the benefits of this new technology, and maybe it would work. Let them take the time to reflect on what the information you've given them could do for them. And then you've got your personal attributes, which of course are an array of not just these ones on here, but being flexible and honest. Decisiveness. If you've got serious issues going on, then you do need to highlight them. Like Angela says, we need to be able to be forthright when it's needed, but at the same time, sit back and be patient with people. Different clients have different time frames, different time scales. It takes them longer to absorb information. And sometimes you as a consultant just have to be patient. Yeah, as painful as that is, I'm afraid. So using those things and how we can use those different elements of competence to influence behaviour. Just a few images for you, really. And these are probably the three things that I think are most important as a consultant. The first one is time. Being realistic about the time scales that things are going to take. It is not a quick fix. You can't fix the world in one visit. It's about taking time. It's about not only taking time, but spending time with clients, spending time for them to process what you are saying and being fair the amount of information you give to them. A really good example of the use of time in consultancy is where you're doing an inspection with someone, or you're doing a safety tour, you're walking around their site, and you guys will have know this feeling, I expect. I know I remember it well on many occasions, where you're walking through a site doing a safety tour, you're observing things, as Angela's spoken about, and the person you're with on that site is walking about 10 paces ahead of you. They're too busy looking at the next thing, and actually sometimes you have to stop, and you as the consultant has to give them the gift of time. You have to be able to pull them back and say, just slow down and think and observe and see if there's anything else that we can see in this scenario that could cause us a problem in the future. Too often we're rushed and we want to do things so quickly that things get missed. And that doesn't change culture. Culture changes when people get a chance to start reflecting on their behaviours and what they're doing. And that works with employees and directors. It doesn't matter which level you're at. With the case study I was talking about, we were working with directors and shop floor personnel. This is a picture of an amazing beach that I visited in Wales. And what this picture does for me is it reminds me that as consultants, our job, part of that is to look at the horizon. It's about looking at the bigger picture for that organisation. So often our clients and our clients' employees are so very focused on the role that they have and the job that they are doing that they find it very hard to see the bigger picture. How will what they do now affect the rest of the workforce or affect their industry? How will it improve things? So that's a really important part of consultancy and affecting culture, remembering that there's a horizon view that we have to impart with our clients and help them to see, which will help them develop a positive view of safety and a positive view of what changes they can make and effects they can have. This is the last of the three images that I pulled out for you for today's session. This is a walkway to the beach that I've just shown you a picture of, strangely, which is where I wanted to go. That was my objective on this given day. And we all have that when we want to get a positive safety culture. We all know where we want to be, but it's about how we get there. And as a consultant, your job is to hold the hand of that client, to walk alongside them and to make them feel comfortable, to help them not be scared, not be fearful that the HSE are going to knock on their door, not be fearful that they're going to hurt people, but to help them be positive and to look to see how they're going to do that very slow, that incline walk up this slope to get to where they want to be. The case study that I started to talk about where these guys were at the beginning of our journey together, we applied a lot of those things and many more. This is a topic we could talk about for hours, I'm sure. But when we started working with them and through the process, we put in place a dust reduction program that's very specific to this industry. It was a dusty environment, and that's where those risks were coming, a lot of those risks were coming from. We put a dust reduction program in place because everyone in the workforce could understand that there was a benefit for them, which naturally improved their buy-in to wanting it to be a safer culture. We had a clear and relevant action plan. That sounds very technical, doesn't it? And we done monthly visits. In the first instance, we were spending monthly visits with these clients, initially working with directors and operations managers, and then involving the workforce and pulling those guys individually into our meetings to talk about the issues that we were looking at on any given day within those meetings and those safety tours, and putting a program of education in place to give them that knowledge, where I talked about sharing knowledge and technical information, making sure that people have that to try and influence that culture. The quote on the left-hand side of your screen is an overview that came from that client at that time, and it's a nice place to be. You know, an approach of education, training and steady progression, rather than rushing to try and fix lots of different things in one big leap. And that's how you improve safety culture. You don't tell someone to have a good safety culture, you encourage them and you hold them at their hands to get there with a plan. They now do manage risk as a matter of course, with proactive behaviour within their team. The picture on the right is really for me to show off how amazing the company are, because they've had this achievement over a period of 4 or 5 years of changing their culture, and now they've installed a wall within their factory, so actually the dust is reduced and the exposure to people is reduced as well. So that's quite an achievement, I think. One final quote that I want to leave you with, that I actually was told the other day in a marketing discussion, strangely, but I think it reflects really well when we talk about positive safety culture and how we get that. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's a quote from Maya Angelou. And that is safety culture. That is how we help to promote a positive safety culture, in my opinion. It's about making people feel secure and understanding the purposes and helping them to change the way they feel about safety. I hope that's helped. I'm going to stop sharing, hand back to Neil, I believe, for any questions.
Thank you so much, both of you. I said at the beginning we were very fortunate to have you both here, and certainly you have not disappointed, either of you. We have some fabulous questions coming in, but just a few things that you know, both of you said. Okay, so sharing what we know, what a great message. See it as others see it. Remember timescales. Look at the horizon. Hold their hand. There's some fabulous stuff in here, you know. And you also both mentioned imposter syndrome. Don't ever consider that again. Okay, otherwise I'll be after you. Right, here comes some questions then. I'm going to start at the very top. We've got a question from Dedi in Indonesia. So hi Dedi, I hope all is well out there. He wants to recall a question asking about how we measure our culture in the organisation. Is it enough just to see the achievement of our organisation in the KPIs? So how would we like to do this? Shall I pick on you, or are you going to volunteer? Let's go for Angela first.
I thought you might. I mean, you have KPIs for positive things and KPIs for negative things, don't you? I mean, you look at your accident and your incidents and the little things that make the difference. And as I said in my slide, you know, when you walk around, you get that feel of what's right and what's wrong. But KPIs for production, for positive stuff, and have we reached our targets in whatever widget you're producing, yeah, but also the negative ones. You know, we don't want to have 5 incidents a month. We don't want to have 2 real accidents a year. We want to get them to vision 0, as a lot of people call it. So I think you can use your KPIs in that respect, and that might give you an indication. That might be an answer.
Marvellous, thank you. Natasha, would you like to add anything to that one?
Just briefly, I think. I always, when it comes to measuring of culture, I love the positive measurements that we can do. How many times have we had a discussion with someone regarding safety? How many times have the workforce brought up safety? I was talking to a client the other day. They run a small sort of school for children, let's say, with after-schooly type clubs, and they were saying that they had been approached by their staff to say, actually, I think we need this equipment now. This would make it safer. And I think if we can capture that information, then it's a really good gauge of your safety culture throughout the layers of the organisation, which is really important.
Lovely, thank you very much. 2 great answers there. So I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to pick on Natasha next first. You see. So the next question we have is from Antonia. How do you influence the safety culture of an organisation that's undertaking low hazard activities and views health and safety as a trivial task? Right, let's go with Natasha first. Good
question.
Yeah, really good.
Really good question. I suppose, you know, you've got to consider what that risk is, and yes, if it is a low risk environment, then, you know, I think usually a short discussion with people, actually having a conversation with them, just a short discussion and picking out where the risk really is. I think as consultants, a lot of the time we think that we have to cover all bases and sort of do a compliance check against every area. I think highlighting where a significant risk may be would be relevant. An example, I don't know how clear I'm being, but we've got a call centre, for instance, you know, a small call centre, small office, not many people in it. And they were in that place at the very beginning. But actually, by highlighting to them that their significant business risk was that of musculoskeletal disorders, that made them sort of stand up and say, this is really important now. If I talked to them about COSH regulations because they had a bottle of bleach in their toilet, they probably wouldn't have been very interested. But actually turning it around to the business risk of insurance claims and those sorts of things can be really useful. So with those businesses, you've got to find the 1 or 2 things that would really impact them, I think, to help them understand, because it is important.
I think that's absolutely great answer. Angela, do you want to chip in on that one? Or shall we move to the next?
Yeah, I was going to say similar things to, you know, DSE risk assessments and that sort of thing. I mean, we've got a lot of office-based industries, haven't we? And we've also got the mental health and the stress side of things as well. You know, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if things aren't good at home or you've got other pressures as well, you know, you can have those pressures that come through into the workplace too. I always find an interesting one to do is a role risk assessment. So if you're in a lower risk industry, you actually assess the role of someone. So they might be dealing with a low hazard piece of equipment. They might be spending a lot of time at a desk. They might be spending time driving in a car. There might be all sorts of other things that are not just the obvious. So a role risk assessment sometimes is a really good idea.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much, Angela. The next one is from John Marsden. So I think it's partly a statement as well as a question, but I'm going to frame it as a question. So we often have difficulty discussing machinery safety with people and get negative responses when they perceive that using the safety features will inhibit their ability to use the machine correctly. So yeah, this is about hearts and minds things, isn't it, and education. So how would you approach that one, Angela?
I think that's probably a sign of a poor culture in a way, isn't it? That people aren't embracing health and safety. I'm not saying they have to go out and cuddle health and safety out and kind of embrace it, but, you know, use it as part of their daily routine. Is that machine is dangerous for some reason or another, and the fixtures and fittings on that machine, the guards that come with it, are there for a reason. So it's really, as you say, hearts and minds. You've got to win them over if you can, using those communication skills we have. If not, it might just be take the hard line and say, actually, you've got to do it this way. And then probably you need to look at whether they've got the training that tells them why they should be using it that way, whether they've got the management and supervision support that also keeps reminding them they should use it that way. But, you know, there's no way that you should be using a machine that has got some sort of hazard attached to it and not using it in the proper fashion, I would suggest.
Yeah, thank you for that. Natasha, anything to
add? Yeah, as always, I've always got something to say, haven't I?
Well, I didn't like to say.
The other bit of that, and the way that we approach it sometimes with our clients, is to say that, you know, a lot of the time those people who have issues with the use of those safety features are actually, it's because they've got so much confidence in themselves and their abilities. And the way that we sometimes overcome that with people is to talk about how someone else using the machine may be affected. So it may not be about them and their safe use, but actually what we're trying to do is put a safe work instruction or operating procedure in place that will protect anyone, even if they're not as skilled as this person. So reminding them that you recognise how competent they are at the use of that equipment, but at the same time, this is not just about them, it's about the apprentice we're about to take on, or it's about, you know, their friend's child who's coming to work with them to do work experience, or whatever it might be, finding another way, another angle to go at it with.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. We've got so many questions. I'm going to have to jump down the list a bit, but hopefully we can pick some really great ones out of here. Okay, so from Brian Holland, we have one here. At what point should a consultant withdraw where the client at all levels does not engage with the advice, and how can you cease engagement tactfully? Who was it next? It was Angela, wasn't it? No?
I'll take it if you like, I don't mind. I think we've got to go back to the four pillars, haven't we? You know, the service, the integrity, the competence, and you know, just making sure that almost you protect yourself to a certain extent. I mean, I've got written into my service level agreement when I go into a new client to say, you know, it is my job to advise, but it's your job to do, in that different wording, obviously. You know, I can advise on the law, but the law is the law, regulations are the regulations, and part of what you have to do is seek competent advice. Part of what you have to do is make resources available for health and safety. And if they're quite obviously not listening to you and not engaging with you, it might be that, as we've said, you know, building relationships hasn't worked, in which case maybe you need to tactically withdraw. But I think you do need to protect yourself to a certain extent. And if they're just not going to go with you, I think you might just be stuck and have to call it to an end. I have done that before. And I thought, you know, however, I've worked with them for about 6 months or so, these people. And no matter what I had done, you know, I'd go into the next meeting and the report that I put in, or the summary of recommendations, they just hadn't done any. They hadn't done any. And it wasn't because they couldn't, it wasn't because they couldn't find time, it wasn't because they didn't have the resources, it was just that the attitude was completely wrong. And I wonder, actually, as consultants, you know, we can't solve the world's problems, we can do our best, but there does come a time when we need to protect ourselves, because if something awful happens, you know, you've either got to have it really documented well, I've advised you this, I've advised you that, or you've got to get out. I don't know what you think, Natasha.
Yes, I think I should apologise for my dog, who everyone heard for just a short while ago. Everyone in my house has strong opinions. Yeah, I think what you said about documentation is really important. Angela, as a consultant, we make sure that we keep quite clear records of significant things that we've done on site with clients to help them understand. It is very difficult if clients won't do and help work with you. And the simple answer for me is, as soon as a client shows signs that they're not working with you, if you can't communicate with them and get them to agree to do that, then I would cut a contract straight away.
Okay, great. I
Okay.
think we've got about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to chuck one more in there. So I hope I choose carefully here. From Ishmaela. Thank you very much. Concerning talking with the workers. So this is about a line of communication thing. If communication is only supposed to be by the line manager, how do we convince, how do safety professionals convince the management about this in changing positive safety culture? So I think that's about, don't talk to the consultant, you have to talk through the manager. Natasha?
Yeah, it is very much so by the sounds of it. We do come across this every now and then. What we do is we spend time with the manager, we get the manager trained up, get them through a training course, get to spend some time with them, except that for a period of time, we will only be able to speak with that middle manager or that managing director or whoever it is that we're working with. And try for a period of time to encourage them, to show them how important that communication is, and that actually it's a good thing, because if their workforce are accepting of talking to the consultant, then it will show that, you know, there's nothing to hide, and it's got that transparency, which is so important. But our job as a consultant, I think, is to help that manager understand why it's so important for them to accept us being there, and to help them in that way.
Angela?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, my first thing there was, oh, have they got something to hide? You know, when they don't want you to talk to all levels in the workforce, is somebody, say the middle manager or the next manager up, are they, I mean, I'm dealing with one at the moment, and he is a middle manager, and he doesn't really want me to engage with the workforce because he knows I'm going to find out that he hasn't been supervising, he hasn't been encouraging, he hasn't been doing what he's supposed to be doing. So he's hiding something. So when you get that kind of, you can only talk to that level, you don't get the full picture. And I think you've got to persuade, influence, use those skills again to be able to get access to all levels, because only by talking to all levels will you find the true picture. And again, that does show me that there's not a good safety culture there, because something's wrong there, why they don't want you to be able to communicate with everybody.
Fabulous, thank you very much. We are in the last minute now, so that's probably the last question. What I've tried to do is to pick some representative questions, and I'd encourage everybody to read your presentations, because I think some of the answers are possibly within that as well. So thank you all very much for your questions today, very, very valuable. So it's over to me just to close things up in the last minute. I want to say thanks first of all to our very, very special speakers, Angela and Natasha. Thank you very much for your valuable time and useful presentations, and for sharing your expertise and your knowledge so willingly with everybody else. I'm sure everybody's got a load out of this, so thank you very, very much indeed. It is just a mark of the professionals you are. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for hosting for us.
Yeah, thanks, Neil.
Thanks to Ben, who's doing things quietly behind the scenes to make sure things work. Thankfully, my internet hasn't dropped out because my house is being pulled apart currently, so hope you all heard that. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for joining. Stay safe until the next time. Hope you've enjoyed it. And this is Mission Safety signing off. Goodbye, everybody.